Hello and welcome to the Red Dice Diaries. Now, it occurred to me the other day that although I run a lot of games, I tend to talk about them after the actual game is finished. We don't tend to chat about them or discuss them outside the people I'm playing the game with or running the game for while the game's actually going on. So I thought I'd remedy that by doing a sort of state of the game video, if you will, and it's just going to be a collection of a few of my thoughts concerning, in this case, my Rose of Westhaven Lamentations the Flame Princess campaign, which I'm running using the excellent Midderlands campaign setting, which ran a very successful Kickstarter and currently has a sequel book, if you will, in the works that expands on the setting. And I'll put a link to the Kickstarter down below so you can have a look at it. The Kickstarter's actually closed now, I believe. I was glad to see it got successfully funded and I've backed it myself. Can't wait to get my hands on it. But back to our particular game. Now, I've recently, as I'm sure any of you are aware who watch my videos, have become quite enamoured with the OSR style of gaming. And that might seem a little bit weird given that previously I've mainly gone for your slightly more sort of story games, to use a term, Fate, more narrative games, etc. But when I was thinking about this the other day, it occurred to me that, well, maybe it's not so strange after all. I mean, a lot of storytelling games tend to focus on placing the sort of narrative above any sort of level of simulationism or mechanics. And to be honest, if you look at something like Lamentations the Flame Princess or Sword and Wizardry White Box, they do pretty much the same thing. Okay, yep, they're based on D&D, but it's not the sort of 5th edition, 4th edition, 3.5 sort of more modern versions of D&D. It tends to be the sort of older versions. Now, the thing about the older versions is they don't really have mechanics for every situation in the same way that some of the more modern versions do. So they rely a lot more on GM fiat and sort of interpreting the rules in your own way and coming up with common sense ruling. And that is pretty much what the narrative games ask you to do. So one of the reasons I was keen to try out these games, in particular Lamentations, is because I wanted to see what it was like to run an ostensibly more old school game, set in a sort of more traditional fantasy setting, dwarves, elves, fighters, etc. But with these very simple rule systems, I was interested to see, first of all, would it throw up any sort of problems? Because my experience of fantasy role-playing and D&D really started with like Warhammer Fantasy role-playing and D&D was more sort of like your version 3, 3.5, etc. So I was used to games with a lot of rules, skills, etc. But having enjoyed the narrative games, I wanted to see how the OSR stuff would bear up. And I've been really enjoying myself so far. I've been lucky enough to get a group of players who were really up for that whole sort of like old school experience. They said they wanted to do some dungeoneering, they wanted to go looking for treasures, they wanted to play a groups of cohesively welded together as a party, all the sort of things that make OSR games great. And I've been really lucky in regards to my players. So thank you to all of them. Now, one of the main things I've been enjoying about OSR is I've been enjoying making some maps. In fact, just before I started filming this video, I've been doodling a windmill there based on some drawings I found online, and I'll be doing like a map that'll probably go there somewhere. Then I'll be scanning that and putting that into Roll20 as ostensibly a little bit of a mini dungeon crawl, and there's plenty of dungeons peppered throughout the setting because that's what my players wanted and I was interested in myself. And I'm a big fan of putting things that both the GM and the players want to see in a game. After all, why would you not? You're there to enjoy yourself, so let's get on with it. Now, I've been enjoying the game greatly, and a huge part of that was due to after I'd started the game, which I decided to set in a sort of fantasy version of England and the United Kingdom, both because I live in England, so I'm more familiar with its history, and also because there's a there's a lot of sort of mysticism, folklore surrounding England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, etc. That is all great fodder and can really be used to add to a game. Now, I was lucky enough that just after we started, the Midderlands campaign setting came out. I backed it, got hold of a copy of it, and I was quite pleased to see that a lot of the ideas really mesh with my own ideas. They're both based on the same thing. After all, the Midlands campaign setting being set in this Viridian-hued, sort of grimy, almost Warhammer-y sort of version, but in a good way, of the United Kingdom, where there really are sort of goblins and trolls lurking under the bridges, and all the various sort of things you associate with the UK mythology, with that slightly sort of tongue-in-cheek style that I personally find so appealing about the OSR movement, is all there in spades. And like I say, it jived so well with the initial ideas I had that it was very simple to graft the two together. And that's what I've done, and my players really seem to be responding to it well. So the main things I've been enjoying about the game so far is the dungeon crawling. I've really been enjoying that, and that's given me an opportunity to get into using Roll20 a little bit more for the various maps, the tokens, etc. It's been really cool to see the players being a little bit more cautious because they know how fragile their characters are, seeing them exploring dungeons by the flickering light of their green gloombug lantern. And then when they've faced a couple of opponents, sort of having to think, right, do we press on and risk going in there, or do we play it a bit more safe? Do we go and get reinforcements? And seeing them sort of come up with plans before they go into a dungeon is a byproduct of this. And because my players are great, so it's been really cool to see that, rather than just seeing people bounce into settings without a care in the world and rely on whatever powers their characters have to see them through. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Anyone who's played D&D, especially 5th edition with me, will know that I tend to, with my own characters, just bounce into a situation and go, nah, to work yourself out some way. But if it doesn't, I'm fine with that. You roll your dice, you take your choice. We've already lost one character out of the party, which was Johannes Pavola's original character, Edwin Locke, who was a sort of battle-scarred mercenary. He's now been recast sort of in the tellings of his companion, Sasha Riverhead, who sort of idolised him a bit. He's now been recast as this almost like mythic hero, and his tale is spread like wildfire, growing out of proportion with the telling, as such things often do. And that's an interesting choice that Dennis, who plays Sasha, has made to sort of spread that about, and they're sort of unofficially now called the Locke Adventuring Company. And whether the spreading of that story will come back to perhaps haunt them in the future, we shall see. Aside from that, I've been really enjoying the simplicity of the systems, and because the systems are so simple, it's almost led to both myself and the players looking to avoid using the systems whenever we can, which surprised me a little at first, but now I'm really trying to embrace that. So for instance, if I was running a 5th edition game, and this isn't to throw shade at 5th edition in any way, because I enjoy playing 5th edition, like it as a game. It's just a different game, so I'm not throwing any aspersions on 5th edition. But if I was running a 5th edition game and the players were looking for a trap, or they're moving through a dungeon, I'd just be like, oh, make me a search roll, or make me a perception roll, or whatever. You make your roll, you find out what's going on, you carry on. Whereas because that's not really an option in something like Lamentations, since most players don't really have those skills. All right, the specialist has got a few decent skills, and Johannes Einloff, who plays the specialist William in our group, this sort of demon tainted or possessed child, is pretty much the stealth master. Points to stealth. When it comes to stealth, it's done. The guy's a freaking ninja. Most NPCs aren't going to see him. But when it comes to something else, like finding traps or exploring a dungeon, we've got people going in with 10-foot poles, tapping the walls, etc., when they see a patch of mold, they're being very cautious. They're taking samples of it. They're doing all sorts of things that I don't think, and this is just via their description, they're doing all sorts of things that maybe you wouldn't see in a game that was chock full of skills that you can just sort of rely on. And there's nothing wrong with that. After all, it can be a nice shortcut just to say, oh, make me a perception roll. Do you see the enemy, etc., rather than just the sort of sometimes arbitrary like D6 surprise rolls that you get in some of the OSR games. But I'm really enjoying the sort of pared down nature of the rules and how it's encouraging both me and my players to think on our feet, to plan a little more, to pay attention to the surroundings. And because they're paying attention to it, it encourages me to describe it more and pay more attention to my descriptions. So I'm having a great time running it at the moment. Like I say, we're using Lamentations, the Flame Princess rules in a sort of slightly tweaked version of the Midderlands setting, since the default Lamentations is a little bit later than the sort of standard medieval period that the Midderlands campaign setting is set in. You know, Lamentations posits the sort of black powder firearms era. So it's a little bit moved on, but tweaking it really wasn't difficult. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details on the Midderlands here. So until I finish making my The Midderlands is the best OSR setting ever video, you'll just have to make do with this little description and my ramblings in this video. So in conclusion, I really enjoyed running this game, and I'm glad to see that my players are enjoying it as well. I asked my players if they had time, because I know everyone's busy, to give me some of their comments on how they think the game is going so far. And the two Johanneses were kind enough to film a couple of minutes with them talking about their impressions of the game. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to them, and then I'll be back in a bit to round up the video. Catch you in a bit.
Hello, my name is Johannes, and was asked to talk about our current Rose of Westhaven campaign a bit. I'm playing with Red Dice Diaries, with another Johannes and with Dennis. And currently we are only 3 people, but we started as 4. And I'm playing a character called William of Riverhead, which is a specialist, and currently I think level 3. He is the scout of the group, and I am enjoying playing him quite a bit, I must say. The thing is that I started off as with a bit of a weird concept, which is explored a bit more from time to time, and I think it's pretty much an open secret that he at least thinks he's a demon. Maybe he even is, who knows. And I was quite enjoying the idea that I could start a character like that and such a campaign, even though it has no mechanical consequences currently for me. I'm just playing a pretty normal character with a slightly higher dexterity. And it's pretty interesting trying to explore this in role-playing while playing such an old-school game. And I started off wanting to play this because it's an old-school game. And these old-school games have quite a fascination for me because there are a lot of people who really love old-school. And I could never really understand why. Because they seemed so simple, so out of touch, so bad mechanically, that I couldn't understand how you could actually enjoy these games in some other way than just for nostalgia. And these, I wanted to try to see what is interesting about them, why these mechanics should be in any way superior than any mechanics of modern games, which have evolved quite a bit since that time. And I started to see what they see in that. The mechanics are so clunky in these games They're so lethal, they are so in the way of gaming that you try to ignore them as much as possible. That's at least what I try to do with stuff my character can't do, which is pretty much everything besides stealth. I can't really fail at stealth anymore, but I can at pretty much everything else. I don't want to fight. I don't want to get into any danger. I don't want to roll any saving throws. And I really see that this changes the way I play this game. Because of the thing that I don't have the safety of my saving throws. I don't have the safety of having something that mechanically buffers me from the game world. And this changes a lot about what you do as character. You have to be much more careful. You have to be much more thoughtful about what you do and when you do it. You have to have a backup plan. You have to have your friends nearby. You have to have a way to back up. You have to think much more yourself and not your character. You can't just make a knowledge check and let your character know what to do. And this part of playing such a game is really interesting because you really have to be constantly on give your best. You have to have a bit of luck, of course, because sometimes you get attacked from nowhere. But having a good plan is far more important than that. And paying attention is also is. And I must say, I quite enjoy how John GMs this game. He tries to incorporate whatever we want to do. He allowed me to playing this weird concept, and he followed through with it. He even topped me a bit of it and tried to make something interesting with it. And I really love how we are pretty much able to do whatever we want. We are not restricted to go somewhere. We are not just restricted to work in a certain way or stay at a specific place. He simply goes with whatever we want to do. And it's very interesting not to follow a path of breadcrumbs, but to really explore a world and do what we want to do and with who we want to talk with and try tricks out and try things out we learned to do. And I hope we can explore this path any further in the future and try to see where all this leads us. We just really started with dungeoneering, and that's the part I was most curious about when we started. So I hope there's lots more to come. See ya.
So, thematic content in our Rose of Westhaven game. The setting, the locations we're visiting, the texture and the feel of most of the stuff we've been doing is kind of grimy, dirty, kind of desperate and backwards in a lot of ways. I enjoy us having go about the fantasy version of the English countryside, viewed through a kind of mellow, slightly lethargic Lovecraftian haze. That's what's in my head, anyway. Alice in Chains, or maybe Typo Negative, covering the collective works of H.P. Lovecraft. Music is very important to me, so I tend to make these associations with other things I enjoy and music, and it doesn't always make a lot of sense. The group is rather strange, which I feel helps generate this sort of fairy tale-like feel to the game, because we have the not a real boy that actually is an evil spirit. We have a young witch. We have a weird-ass plant elf that gets down with the tavern matrons, and the savage and kind of dumb priest of Dagon, the Great Old One. It's a collection of people that maybe shouldn't be together, but we are. And we've touched on a lot of different stuff in the setting, almost any of which I would be definitely down to investigate and invest in more deeply. The Civil War that we kind of started out with, the Royalists and the Parliamentarians, the apparent crusades in distant lands, the weaponized zombie plague, which was, again, in the beginning, very fun, the religious and spiritual conflict in the Havenlands between the old ways and the church,
and the more down-to-earth stuff too, like the kinds of habits and traditions that the people around Porthcawl have, strange fish celebrations, and all the NPCs we've met along the way and what their deal is and what they have going on. We're quite involved with the local Lord Harper now. So the Rose of Westhaven is an OSR sandbox style game, and the things that I enjoy about OSR gaming in the context of the Westhaven game, well, I like the character creation. We're using the Lamentations of the Flame Princess rules, which are very light. I like the character creation and generation because I like imagining the kinds of degenerates and ne'er-do-wells that this process produces, the very short process, and how they could fit into the group of player characters that we have and the setting at large. This ties into the way that I like to play my characters, regardless of what game we're playing. I like to drive them like stolen cars, really. I enjoy the absurdly difficult and hopeless situations they get into, the victories they win, and especially the defeats that they suffer. There's something that fascinates me about the potential for disaster that's not just about overcoming the odds and rising to the challenge. I don't much care for happy endings. I find that tragedy is much more satisfying to me personally, as far as a closure goes. That's not to say I necessarily seek out only tragedy, but I do welcome it wholeheartedly when it comes. And we've been doing quite a bit of combat. Not as much recently, though. We've been exploring quite a bit, but we've been doing combat as is to be expected in a sort of exploratory adventure game, I presume. My first character was the haunted and scarred soldier, Edwin Locke, he was called, who fought in the Civil War and deserted at some point to travel back home. I got to adventure with Edwin for a while at the start of the campaign. He was very well prepared for the dangers of adventure. He was capable and well equipped. And he also ended up generating one of the more memorable series of events, at least for me, in this game so far. Because every time John would have one of the NPCs take a swing at Edwin, it would be a critical hit without fail, which ended up with him getting beaten and eaten by a zombie and turned into a zombie himself very early in the game. Our player character group is sort of halfway officially named after him now, the Locke Adventuring Company. And one of the other characters spun a ridiculous tale to the locals about Edwin as a grand hero fighting valiantly when he was in reality just knocked on his ass by a zombie and eaten. And this trend would continue as I started playing my second character, Audran Molag. John's NPCs would just continue to instantly put him down, and he would be facing death's door at pretty much every session, sometimes multiple times. And this tendency for every enemy that I meet to be a master swordsman or a ninja assassin has been the source of much of my personal enjoyment in the game. I love it when games spawn memes like this spontaneously. It makes for great and memorable experiences. And even though I'm loving the fact that we've got a couple of levels now, third level I'm at now with Audran, I have a feeling I'm gonna miss the threat of being instantly demolished by anything that sneezes my way. And well, about exploring, we've been doing. We started the game with the intent of doing a bunch of dungeon crawling. At least that was part of the interest that we all had. Dungeon crawling in the traditional sense of the words. We go to distant or abandoned places, desolate places, and see what's up. I started my tabletop career with AT&T 2nd edition way back in the day, but I've actually never played a proper dungeon crawl focused game. Our stuff used to focus on other stuff. I'm really down with the sort of direction we've been taking with Westhaven in the recent sessions, because I'm interested in the dungeon crawling aspect of the game. Poking around places where we're definitely not supposed to be has a lot of appeal to me. The exploration is fun, and there's a genuine thrill in making it back with something valuable, whether that's ancient relics, or a bag of bones, or psychedelic mushrooms. I like the trope of scrappy losers trying to make ends meet, and I've been having a blast scraping and digging around Westhaven so far. And the fact that John's apparently gone crazy with map making and mega dungeons, and that makes me happy. Uh, though I'm also itching to just randomly pick a location or a place and travel to it on our bigger world map that we're using for the Havenlands. Since we're using a bunch of other great sandbox material, the Midderlands setting for one, and I know John has a lot more that he's taking at least inspiration from, in addition to just John's own creations and homebrew. But that's my ramble on the state of the game. Very much looking forward to the next session. Thanks, John.
So there you are. Those are our thoughts on the state of the game so far. I'm really, really enjoying the Rose of Westhaven game. And I know sometimes games fold due to reasons out of people's control, but I'm really hoping we can get up to a decent level with this game and that it carries on running for some time. I mean, Lamentations has rules for up to level 20. I'd love it if the game could actually get there. Now, given the fact it takes an awfully long time to advance in levels, certainly in this game it seems to, and knowing how real life tends to get in the way, I know that's probably not likely, but I'd really love for this game to go for the long haul and to continue developing. I've had a great time running it, great group of players, very entertaining game, Lamentations. Excellent, fucking excellent setting, the Midderlands. So maybe we'll do another one of these state of the game videos further down the line. Who knows? Until I see you next time, take care, and from all of us, happy gaming.